Good afternoon, this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to a very frustrated right show. I think I did this once when I first started the Frankfurt Slasher, when I lost the entire tape. I couldn't get it back, and my son is a computer genius. If he can't get it, I'm telling you, it's gone. So just last night, I had taped The Boy in the Box. I mean, it was perfection, I'm telling you. Gone. I opened up the computer, I hit something hard, my entire Boy in the Box, it doesn't even make sense. My son works on computers and he still doesn't know what I did. He swears I didn't save it. I did save it. I went into this folder. He did get it out. And then what do? I fuck it up again. And this time he couldn't get it out. He even was like, I could piece it together because he could find elements of it. And I said, by the time, I didn't want him to work, 9 hours on something. That was bad, though. I never had it completely finished. It's been a very interesting day. I'm going to start doing free book giveaways. I have a lot of true crime books. A lot. So I'm going to start that. This one's the Billy Jensen book. He does I believe he does a podcast with Paul Holes. Book is very good. It's called Chase Darkness with Me. So if you want to be a part of the free book giveaway, go to my Instagram account. That was something else I was going to talk about. My Instagram account was made years ago. My son is right. Everything should be the right show. I get it. And it should be, because people don't know how to find me unless you go to the rightshoepodcast.com, which is my website, and there's pictures there. Just go there. That's the easiest way. If you ever need to email me, if you want to be a part of the book giveaway, drop an email through there. But people seem to like Instagrams. My Instagram account, ShopaholicDeb44. The Right Shoe moniker is there. Everything's the right shoe. My Twitter account is BookshotWorm1. I do check these all the time. I should make them all the right shoe. My son keeps saying, just do it. But if you want to join the free giveaway, either drop me an email at therightshoepodcast.com. The email link is right there on the first page. Or go to my Instagram account, which is ShopaholicDeb44. Or go to BookshotWorm1, Twitter. Maybe one day I'll get them all together. For now, that's why I made the website, because that is the rightshoepodcast.com. And I love doing these podcasts. I really do. I don't like what just happened today, but it happens. The only thing is I'm afraid I'm going to forget something that I had on the original one, and I don't want that to happen. So let's get started. This is The Boy in the Box. Let's take it from the top. Now, The Boy in the Box, my friend R, she always gives me suggestions. She's one of the biggest suggestion makers. I do get emails, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten about Mayhem. It's gonna take me a little bit, but I will get to Mayhem if it kills me. If there's noise in the background, please forgive me. I don't know what else to do at this point. Jeez, it's 6 o'clock. Who the hell is freaking weed whacking at 6 o'clock? I swear to God. Okay, let's not get crazy. Let's be nice. Let's get it together. My friend R, she comes and she gives me a lot of suggestions, especially for Philly. She is like the Philly queen. She knows Philly up, down, sideways. Anything that's happened, she was stunned that I didn't know. I didn't know about the Lex Street Massacre. I had no clue about it. I was just pregnant with my son then, so, Anyway, she says, do The Boy in the Box, and I'm like, well, is there enough material there? And then I started reading about it, and I'm like, oh my God, this story is fascinating. And I hope that I get everything that I got in the first one, because it is a crazy story. And at the end, I'm going to talk briefly about Barbara Jean Horn. Originally, this was going to be Boy in the Box, Girl in the Box, because Barbara Jean Horn was, and we'll get to it. Starting with The Boy in the Box. This situation, I'm going to say, started around February 26, 1957. And there's a reason I say around. There was several things that happened before this poor kid in a box was discovered. Now, there's a couple things I always knew this. It made me realize that back in 1957, as I was reading, I know now the big thing is there's a lot of things with the police and society seem to be button heads right now. But back then in the 50s, the police were really the caretakers of where they worked, that given neighborhood. And so many things happened to make me realize that I hadn't realized just how much they were entrusted and stuff like that. All right, there was a guy named Jim. This is not his real name. He was a Polish American, and he was about 17. He could have been a little older, but he lived in Fox Chase. Now, back then, Fox Chase was the country. Fox Chase is only about 4 miles from where I sit. The Cotman Avenue stretches a long way, and back then, I guess, the Fox Chase Cancer Center is out there on Cotman Avenue, and everyone knows Fox Chase Cancer Center. It's a world-renowned cancer center. But if you go down Cotman Avenue, that's where Fox Chase is, back down there. But back then, it was like the country. So there was a guy who was like a trapper. He trapped animals for food or for, making a cap. I don't know, whatever you do. And so they had him. He was doing his trapping. I say Polish American because his parents were from Nazi occupied Poland. So they were terrified of the law. I mean, can you imagine coming from Nazi occupied anywhere? The point is, Nazi occupied Poland was not pleasant, and they wanted nothing to do with the law. They lived a simple life. So the son was out and in the fields, and he was on their property, and he was trapping. As he was going through the traps, he noticed that there was a box in the field. When he picked up the box, he thought there was a doll inside, but it wasn't a doll. It was a child, and he flipped. He dropped the box. Actually, the first guy, this guy Jim, I am not even so sure if he just looked in the box, but I know he knew enough that he saw it was a child and not a doll. But he freaked. So he runs home. He's like, I'm never going to tell my parents, because the week before, his brother had been in the fields and he saw somebody hanging from a tree. I mean, tell me that wouldn't startle you. I walk in these woods behind me all the time, penny pack. I can imagine seeing something like that. The point is he called the police because somebody was hanging in the tree, and when the police came to the house to question Jim's brother, they realized that this guy had committed suicide, but they were just questioning him because he found the guy. Well, the parents were like flipping out because they were police officers. They didn't want them in their house. They were terrified. This guy Jim was like, I am not doing that to my parents. I'm not saying anything I found. And he runs home. I guess another day goes by, maybe not even a day, but a little bit of time passes, and there's a guy, Ben, driving down the street. He sees traps for animals, and he is on the other side of the fence saying, this is Philadelphia. This isn't the frontier. Who is trapping? What is it? Like, he was pissed. Like, he was like, it's poor animals, because I guess a rabbit had crossed his path, so he went out. He kept messing with the traps he rigged them so that they weren't going to work properly. I guess he put sticks in them. He was like kind of chuckling to himself, like, haha, I get this trapper. And the week before, he himself had gotten in trouble because there was a school, get this, I don't remember the original name, I'm not sure, but it was the so-and-so school for wayward girls. I guess back then when you were, maybe got pregnant or you were smoking cigarettes or something like that, they put you with these wayward girls. And he had been peeking at them, not in any like perverse way, like a normal 18-year-old kind of way, like Porky's or, there's movies like Peeking Through the Shower, just a normal curious boy. But the cops had caught him doing that, and they kind of yelled at him. He got scared because as he was playing with the traps, he saw a box. He looked inside the box, and he didn't even see if it was a boy or a girl. He got so scared and so freaked out. He ran into his car, and as he was driving home on the radio, they said there's a girl missing from New Jersey. So he was like, oh my God, it might be that girl. He went to a Catholic school. He goes to school the next day. He tells his priest, and the priest says, you know what you have to do, Ben. You have to tell. And Ben also is a pseudonym. He says, Ben, you have to tell the authorities. So he calls the cops. Now, Elmer Palmer and Sam Weinstein come. I think Elmer Palmer was a lieutenant at the time. Sam Weinstein was a police officer. They had got the call to come out about the box. They were, like I said, that was when only cops saw this kind of stuff. Normal people did not see. Like nowadays, dead people, especially in big cities like Philadelphia right now, is just under siege with gunshots. It is unbelievable how many innocent kids are dying from the just stray bullets or kids shooting each other. I just can't believe the way they for drugs, and it's a shame. But the ones that really get me are the children that get killed while they're playing hopscotch. I mean, that's just outrageous. So we're kind of desensitized by this now. But back then, nobody saw dead people. When I was 18, I started working. I don't want to name the hospital, but it was a big city hospital, and it was on Broad Street. The guys there, they were the autopsy guys. They were helpers. And the doctors would actually were very nice to me too, but mostly the autopsy guys, they would bring me into the morgue and they would show me the dead bodies. Now, when the dead bodies were cleaned up and ready, like when they were taking out organs, they showed me all this stuff, and I just thought it was fascinating. One time, this woman got hit by a bus out on Broad Street. The bus driver felt so bad for her. He had a nervous breakdown. He did not see her, and she was an older lady, and he ran over her. I think he had a heart attack, actually, the bus driver. I was out there when that happened, and then I was in the hospital when they were bringing her in. And her face, the way it was so, like, fake looking because it had been smashed by the bus. That looked like a Halloween mask. But I think as an older person now, I think that sight would freak me out. And I don't know, maybe even the sight of the cleaned up morgue people would freak me out. But again, back then, regular people did not see dead people. So for these kids to find this dead boy in a box, it was just unnerving. Elmer Palmer and Sam Weston come. They said the two of them, till the day they died, would not forget the look in that child's eyes. That child's eyes spoke volumes. He died in fear. He was battered, he was bruised, he was naked, his hair looked like it had been cut by a lawnmower. That's what the one officer said. And they said it just killed them inside, and they thought, we're going to get this guy right. Whoever did this, guy or girl, we're going to get them. And they, in the beginning, because there was like a little bit of clues around, they thought it would be easy. But the thing that even haunted me was the way that they said the boy had such fear in it. Whatever he had seen before he died was terrifying to him. So, of course, what are you going to think? He was battered and abused. When he went to the morgue, there was Spellman was the medical examiner at the time. And he said this kid was a series of contradictions. They bring him in. He's very abused. He said, like, his hair, the haircut, it was, I guess when you're trying to figure out what happened, you start making scenarios in your head. And the medical examiner said, I was trying to take into account that the kid he even took him to an anthropologist later on, because he said he looked like he was 2 or 3, but he thinks he was older. He was just malnourished. And the anthropologist did corroborate this. He said he has like he's about 4, but his bone age is only about 2 or 3 because he was severely underfed. So again, we go back to the medical examiner, and he said the kid's hair looked like it had been chopped with a lawnmower, but yet his fingernails were clipped so beautifully. He had surgical incisions throughout his body, like he had been to the hospital for surgeries, and he was circumcised, so he had been to the doctor, but yet he was malnourished, bruised. Even in the pictures, which I will put up, you can see the bruise marks. I mean, the kid was battered, was just so upset. He said he could picture like something happening, perhaps like they were trying to give the boy a haircut, and then maybe he was squirming around to it. So they put him in the bathtub, because he said the way the hairs were sticking to him, it was like they had been cutting his hair naked, he said, which is very odd. So he said perhaps he was squirming, and then they said, look, we got to get this hair off of you. Took him into the bathtub, and then he started really squirming, and then perhaps the adult lost their nerve and just beat the living crap out of him. That's what the medical examiner was imagining. He was trying to figure out what happened to this kid. But in the meantime, the cops, there were several things that happened. The cops had found the box. They found a cap that was nearby, a man's cap with a leather strap, and of course the boy. There was a good Samaritan that would come up and say, when he found out what had happened, he said, look, I saw this. I saw a woman and her. He said it was a boy, but he said I actually never saw the face, so it could have been a girl. And this all comes together in the end with somebody named Mary. So remember all these details, because it is, I think, this woman Mary, I think she might have been right on with what happened. So they, like I said, the medical examiner's gone through. They have the box and everything. Also, I have to say that the medical examiner also found a sediment, this brown sludgy sediment in the kid's esophagus that made him think he threw up. And he said, I did not realize the significance of this until years later when it would come up again. So he had thrown up whatever this brown sludge was. Back to the cops and the people. They went to the house where the trapper was. They had to go to Jim's house because that house was on the land where they were trapping. So they said, so of course the parents have another heart attack when the cops knock on the door. But he said, yes, I did see he didn't know it was a boy, but they said, when did you find him? And he thinks it was around February 24th. Which is a little before when they got there. So they're trying to get a timeline for this kid. You're like, when was he actually put here? And then there was a good Samaritan who came forth. And he said that he saw, like I said, a woman and a mother and her child standing in front of the car. He thought it was a boy, but he couldn't be sure because he never saw the face. It looked like they were hiding in front of the license plate. He asked them if they wanted help. He said, is this broken down? Do you need help? And they were like being very nervous and evasive. No, we're fine. And he said something struck him about these two individuals. The little girl kept like warily looking, he thought it was a boy, nervously looking at the mother. And the mother was like, we're fine. And the trunk was open, so he thought maybe their car had broken down, but when he heard this story, he thought maybe they were the ones that put the box out there. So the cops, they wrote it down and they went on their way. Now, this time, they did something a little differently. They wanted to get this case, so they went and they started investigating the box. The box itself came from Indiana, and it was shipped to, they gathered, it was shipped to a few places, one of them being to a J.C. Penney store in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, which is to the west of here. There's a Tower Theater there. It's a concert venue. It is the best concert venue. It's small. It's intimate. It has the best sound system. Love. I seen the Colt there. Oh my God. Excellent. But that's what Upper Darby reminds me of. So the Upper Darby, they're in for the box. They go to the J.C. Penney. There's a cash only business, so they can't, it's untraceable. So then they say, well, we'll do better with the leather cap. So they find this cap store, and it's on South 7th Street. And it was called, gosh, I had that written in the first one. It was called the Robbins Bald Eagle Hat and Cap Company, 2603 South 7th Street in South Philadelphia. And the owner of this shop was named Hannah Robbins. And she said, listen, I know anybody that comes into this place. There was also a blanket in the box. It was like an unusual patterned blanket, but when they tried to look that up, they said it must have been homemade. They truly never found the origin of that blanket. She says, I remember the gentleman that came into this place. He wanted a leather strap put on the cap. And she said and they said, well, what do you look like? And she said, well, she said, back then people did really go by European ancestry, or he looked Italian. They still do, but it was even more so back then, because Philadelphia was truly, that's the Italian section, that's the Polish section, that's the Irish section. It's just the way it was. Even the coroner had said, like, the shape of his forehead and stuff, it made him think he was, like, from Scandinavian origin. So they bring out the picture, and they said, did he look anything like this? Because they had doctored up. They even had put the little boy in a suit and dressed him up deceased. But they were trying to get him look as naturally as possible, what he would have looked like in life. She said, it does actually look like him, but blonde hair and a high forehead hardly makes a complete match. And they did actually years later get the DNA from the boy. It was, they got mitochondrial DNA from the little fella out of his tooth. They said thank you, and the guy's thinking, this is crazy. Like, we're going through all this, that we have, a cap that comes from South Philly, a box that comes from Upper Darby, and then the kid who was found in Fox Chase. An exact triangle around Philadelphia. And yet, in that triangle, there's a story there. They had to keep looking. And they were getting a lot of, tips were coming in by the thousands. That's why this, it's a long program, because there was so much material that I had to cut out. It really did. There's probably thousands of boxes just on this kid, because it's been since 1957. And people wanted to find out who he was. They have another kid. His name was George Knowles, and this is what cracked me up. Back then, you had to register your bicycle with the police department. He went to, like a little good boy, he brought his bicycle to register it, and he saw the picture of the unknown boy. He never forgot it, and all those years later, amazingly enough, he's since deceased. His name was George Knowles. He would eventually be the maker of the website americasunnknownchild.net, which does tell the story of the boy in the box. And he kept it up until he died, and whoever his family members must keep it up as well. So all those years ago, he remembered, and he said he made his mission. And unfortunately, all these people, there's none of these people that I'm talking about, none of them are still alive, not one. I've checked every single one of them. And that's a shame, because I think with the DNA that they found, it is the mitochondrial DNA, which with mitochondrial DNA, you have to find the female match. Mothers pass mitochondrial DNA onto their children, so it has to be from the mother, not the mother. It has to be a female relative. Like if they were to do how they caught the Golden State Killer, that's how they're gonna. If this ever happens, if they ever get a DNA match, it's probably gonna have to be through that, because as of yet, there's been no DNA match. In the meantime, when they're looking through all of this and they're beating their heads against the wall, and it really became their mission to find who this boy was. And it's a damn shame. I mean, it really was. It broke their heart. The guy said he saw the fear in that kid's eyes, and that drove him through life to figure out the mystery. So there was a few things that stuck out because there were so many false leads. I had to pick out just some that were either intriguing to me or just, one of them, there was a woman who called up. She said, do you know what it's like taking care of an idiot? They cry all the time and you just want to smack them around. Maybe that's why they killed him. Did you ever think of that? So, I mean, the guy that answered it, like, oh boy, but can you imagine, first of all, she calls him an idiot. I guess words like mentally challenged weren't out yet. But that is peculiar that she, why would she think that? Why would she think that the child was mentally challenged? That stuck with me. Again, when we get to this girl Mary's story, which I think has the most genuine aspects to it. Then they are really searching. There was a story about in Holden, Colorado, which was only 25 miles away from Boulder, which is where one of America's most infamous girl children who was murdered was JonBenet Ramsey. So only 25 miles away in 1957, 40 years before she would be found, they came upon this family with the last name Martinez. And the dad was, I think he was a truck driver or something, and he was never home. It was a shame because the mom had to take care of him, and the neighbors all complained. They were like, these kids are so malnourished. They're disgusting. They're digging in the trash can for food. And all the neighbors were complaining. They said, then there was 5 kids, and now there's only 4 there. Like, what's going on? So when they heard that, I think they sent out the Colorado investigators first. I don't know, even though Philly might have even flown out for this one. But they did go to this house. When they answered the door, the woman was like, first of all, I only have 4 children. She said the one was a neighbor, and I don't know where he went. And then they came back. The husband comes home and he is saying, look, my wife, like postpartum psychosis, all that depression, that wasn't even a thing, that wasn't a term yet. Nobody knew that it existed. He said each subsequent child she had, she just got worse and worse. So after the 4th child, so as they're looking out the window, they're only seeing 3, and even the dad was like, I don't know, there's only 3 now. I know I had 4. So they bring the woman in, and this is what the woman says to them. My husband's he's always out on the road. I feed them as best I can. I did have 4 children. One was a girl who starved to death, and I threw her in the trash can. You can go try and find her. So not only did I think, oh my God, I mean, she threw in a trash can, and the cops look at each other like, and they never found this girl, so they could never charge the woman. She was probably telling the truth, but they could never prove it. Plus, this brought up a very interesting point. Children are pretty much, I know starvation still goes on, but I think back then it was even like there was no birth control. I think there was a lot of issues where people had a lot of children and they just couldn't feed them. And I think that kind of stuff happened more often than we knew. Not with the boy in the box, because he was abused. I mean, he didn't even grow right because he had been abused. There was really nothing they could do. And I'm thinking, she's right, where do you get the money? And there wasn't any programs to feed your children. I mean, it was just 2 that stuck out in my head. Time's going by, years are going by, the Good Samaritan. They just said it was so frustrating, and so as the years went by, they really couldn't believe it. They got lead after lead after lead, and the same investigators were a part of it. And then in 1990 came this VIDOC Society, which is in Philadelphia. Now, I didn't even know about the society until this came out. The Vdoc Society is a members-only crime-solving club that meets on the 3rd Thursday of every month in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They investigate cold case homicides. Now, VDOC, the Vdoc Society is named for a French detective, Eugene Francois Vidocq, and he was a former criminal himself and used his criminal mind to look at the psychological perspective of the perpetrator. So in VDOC, it's usually members of law enforcement, detectives, scientists, prosecutors. They do this out of the kindness of their heart. They pay like $100 yearly fee, but you have to be pretty prestigious to be a part of this group. I would love to do something like that. A woman calls, and her name is Mary, and she has a story that is so mind-blowing that a lot of the investigators to this day, even within the VDOC Society, they said because her story matched so well, they don't know because it can't be proven. Let's go with her story. Her mother one day said, we're going for a ride. She said they were still in Philadelphia, but they weren't, she wasn't sure where. This child would not be a familial member. That's why, when she told the story, they were like, well, the mitochondrial DNA we got from the child wouldn't match anyway. They get to a house and they knock on the door, and there's a woman, and there was like an exchange. Her mother gave the woman money, an envelope that looked like it was filled with money. The woman gave her child. She comes running back. She hands the baby boy to the Mary. Mary said he had like this smell to him, and she felt so sorry for him, but he smelled like almost like urine. She says, why are we taking this baby? And the mom says curtly, because he needs a place to live. She says, well, can he be my brother? And she says, sure, but you can't keep him upstairs. She didn't question it anymore. She wanted to love this little brother, and she named him Jonathan. Jonathan just rings so true to me, especially when you look at the picture of the unknown child. It really does. He just looks like a Jonathan. If I was a psychic, I just really feel that this woman, I don't know, it's such a true story. It just matches. The mom takes him down the basement and she puts him in a coal bin, and she like uses a box, and that's like his little bassinet, and then she puts a little blanket around him. But she was always afraid. She always was like, he's down in the basement. She always listened to hear if he would cry. He never cried ever. But she was afraid that he was cold, so she would go check on him from time to time. She said the smell of him was always very strong, just urine type smell. So once in a while, the mom would bring him up for a bath, to get into the bathtub. He would never say anything. When he would speak, so-called speak, he would make these noises, like it wasn't a normal speech. And she said she herself was always hungry, so she can imagine the little boy was hungry because he ate a fraction of what she did. But that reminded me of when the girl called the police station and said, do you know what it's like to take care of an idiot? I'm not using those terms. Mentally challenged is what I would use, but I'm thinking of her and the boy who he never spoke. He was like mute. So it seems like perhaps he had like a mental disability, and could that woman have been the one who called? Who knows? A lot of this stuff that Mary says matches. So she would go down as much as she could. She would like rock him back and forth. She really loved the boy. His hair grew very, very long and they never cut it. She knew it was a big secret. So she said sometimes she felt important walking around with this big secret that I have a brother and nobody knows about him. And everything was just fine and dandy until February of 1957. She said she was a teenager then. She was about 14, 15 years old. That night, the mother had made baked beans and they weren't very good. When she came back up after feeding him these baked beans, and remember, baked beans, brown slush with the coroner, they were going to give Jonathan a bath. So she goes downstairs, she brings him up, and she's cursing and dragging Jonathan, which she never saw him upstairs. So that alone was shocking. And she said he had this look of pure terror in his eyes. But he just kept making these weird moaning sounds. He had a diaper on. And she said at this point, he was, 4 or 5 years old. He was way too old for a diaper. So the mom says, cut his fingernails. So she clips his fingernails. And when the tub was full, she took off his diaper. She put him into the tub, and the water was too hot, so he started splashing around and making those screaming noises. The water was getting all over the place, and the mom was like, that's enough, and she was like stomping her feet. Pretty soon he was crying. Now she starts getting really angry. The water was starting to get cold. He throws up. Out comes this brown slushy mess. Brown slush from the esophagus. And I don't think the baked beans up until this point I think the coroner said he really never said anything about the brown slush. It's just not something you would write on a wanted poster or you know, a missing poster. It was just something he had always remembered because it was so curious. So these baked beans are all over the bath water. And she said the mom let out this yell like a howl. She said it was unbelievable. So the boys started crying really hard. And then the mom started slapping him. She started shaking him. She started punching him as hard as she could. And Jonathan was just lying on the floor. He wasn't making any sounds at this point. The mother looked at Mary and said, get out of this room. She figured, or she heard splashing noises again, so she figured the mom had thrown him back in the tub, but she still didn't hear any noise. She only heard the mom screaming, Jonathan, I want you to wake up right now. Come on, right now. So she goes to bed because she's scared to death and she's feeling terrible. She has this horrible feeling inside her. And she said for years and years she had suppressed this feeling. But then she started hearing in the night as she was trying to sleep, she heard the sound of scissors. She thinks the mom was cutting the hair at that point in the bathtub. The next day, she comes in and says, Jonathan never woke up, which she said was such an odd thing for her to just come in there and say that. She remembered thinking, where the heck is my dad? And what are we going to do with this kid? She comes in, the mom is lifting Jonathan out of the tub and she's wrapping him in a blanket. She says, he'll be safe. We're going to put him somewhere safe. So she carries him back down to the basement. Mary's right behind her. And there was like a bunch of stuff in front of their driveway. So they got him into the car. I don't think anybody would have seen them. It was a cold day. It was in February, and they went down a country road. They got out of the car, and they were standing in front of the car, and they were trying to get him out of the trunk. Somebody drove up and said, do you need any help? The mother looked and said, don't open your mouth. I believe that was the Good Samaritan. Yes, he thought it was a boy, but he said he never saw the face, so it could have been little Mary. The Vdoc Society looked into this. They never gave it credence because of the lack of physical corroborating evidence. Is the boy in the box Mary's? I mean, actually, even if it was Mary, well, then they would know what happened to him. But who was he originally? I don't think we'll ever know. I think everybody involved in this story is dead and gone. He would be... in 1957, if he was about 4 or 5, even if he was, say, 7, he would be 72 in 2020. He could still be alive. I mean, that whole life was just taken from him. That story really broke my heart. I had not realized how deep and involved, and I had not realized, I really didn't. So many investigators spent a lot of their lives trying to find out who this kid was. So, this story's gone long. I will go to Barbara Jean Horn real quickly. Barbara Jean Horn lived in Northeast Philadelphia. She lived in a place called Castor Gardens. It's right up the street. And it's like literally right up the street. Nice neighborhood. It was in 1988, July 12th, 1988. She was the only child of Sharon and John Fahey, Northeast section of Philadelphia. Sharon was at work. And you can leave your kids outside. That was no big deal at all. I mean, when it was dinner time, even the littlest of kids knew when it was dinner time. He came at dinner, came in when it got dark. He went inside, came back out, and Barbara was gone. He called the police right away. There were several people that came forth because the cops came out right away. I mean, this child was 4. And they all said that at St. Vincent and Castor Avenue, there was a gentleman carrying a cardboard box. It was a 13-inch Hitachi TV box. White male, between 25 and 30 years old, 5'8", 180 pounds. I'm bad with pounds, so I don't know how I would do that, but that's what they said, with sandy brown hair. He was wearing a white t-shirt and cut off jeans at the time. And again, it held a Hitachi television set. Now, this had aired on Unsolved Mysteries at Robert Stack, and it was done unusually in that Lieutenant Arthur Durant, who was with the Philadelphia Police Department, actually, I know one of the homicide detectives I know, that was his first lieutenant. He passed away recently. He was the one being interviewed, and they never did a reenactment. He just said, like, we would like to, anything you've seen, please call us. Now, for 4 years, everything was unresolved, and there's pressure to get who did this. I have to say, I don't understand this. I even asked, I said, does this make any sense to you? And they said, Deb, you'd be surprised. And it doesn't happen as much anymore. And they were honest in that. They said, there's rules now. You can't keep somebody for an extraordinary amount of time without going to the bathroom and all that. They got this Walter Ogrod. His brother had a burglary happen. And the two detectives had taken extensive pictures of the basement where the burglary had happened. This is the part that makes no sense. So they go and they're looking at this weight set, and they pontificate suddenly that this incident that happened like 2 years prior, that was what was used to beat Barbara Jean Horn, because she had died of blunt force trauma. I mean, I can't imagine the poor parents finding their child in a box. That's disgusting. They were interviewing this Walter Ogrod, and because he was slow, his answers were coming out messed up, and even the mother of Barbara Jean Horn was like, that is not the killer of my daughter. People knew this Walter Ogrod. I think it's just a shame, because Barbara Jean Horn's story is sad enough, but what overshadows it almost is that this Walter Ogrod spent over 20 years in jail for that crime. And everybody knew he didn't commit it. But the first trial was a mistrial because everyone was going to dismiss it. And then one guy stood up and said, well, I think he did it. I don't know why. Maybe he was afraid to say something in front of all his peers, but it only caused a mistrial to happen. And then when the next thing came through, the next trial, then it gains more steam, and you're emotionally vested. You want to see someone pay for this. And I don't think they knew certain things about the case because they convicted Walter. And the thing that makes me crazy is there was DNA that was not allowed to even be tested. I did ask detectives about this, and they said that's just bizarre. Even they were like, I don't even understand that one. So finally, there was a DA that is not my favorite, but in this instance, he did right. He said that he was going to test the DNA. He tested the DNA, and Walter Ogrod had nothing to do with it. So he was going to be released March of this year, but because he had COVID symptoms and they had to test him first, but it was June of this year, 2020, he was released. Spending, I think it was 23 years. It was from 1996. It was, it could have even been a little longer. So for 24 years, this poor guy sat in jail for nothing. And the mother I remember that part. I remember when the mother was like, he did not do it. So that was the Barbara Jean Horn story. It was just so sad. And then they saw this guy carrying this box around, and that was the box that they found Barbara in, and they said that guy looks nothing like Walter Ogrod. The whole thing was just so bizarre. How do you get pictures and say, oh, it must have been those barbells from 4 years ago? I know that story sounds a little rushed. I don't want this to be too long. So if there's anything I missed, I will do an update to this. I'm going to look at it tonight. Remember, it's Debbie Q, The Right Shoe. I have many great episodes coming up. I know one that's coming up is the Cindy James story. It's a homicide-suicide question. That story is so mind-blowing. When I originally saw it years ago, I was young and I thought a certain way, and now I don't know what the heck to think. So that's going to be a really great case. So this is Debbie Q, and you're listening to The Right Shoe.